training is being recorded, and we're talking about core tuning tools. Sometimes we get a little bit ahead of ourselves, and the reality is people want to know about the tuning. I mean, even we were noticing this the other day, even our YouTube videos, the ones that say tuning or basic tuning or tuning tools, those are the ones that people want to know and want to see more about, because that's really what we're doing. We are doing piano tuning. And we probably should have started with this, but we're doing it right now. So we have a series of piano tuning tools that are kind of the essentials. And so I'm going to move this aside because I don't like that. My OCD is kicking in. I want this to be centered. Perfect. So the reality is there's just a handful of piano tuning tools. And so I'm going to start with, obviously, I would say it's the most iconic piano. You know, when you think of a piano tuner, you think of, two things. You think of a tuning fork and you think of a tuning hammer. If you go to our, mentoring website, that's what we put. So there's a lot of, there's been a debate about piano tuning levers or hammers for, 150 years. What's the best? What's the size? All of these things. But at the end of the day, your piano tuning lever or tuning hammer is one of those core tools that you're going to need to have in order to tune a piano. I would say you can get a piano tuning hammer, correct me if I'm wrong, for as little as $15 to $30 on Amazon. Is that about right? Has anybody seen those? They're called the Apprentice hammers.
That sounds right.
Yeah. So, and we're going to go into more tuning hammers on Wednesday. I'm hoping to get one of Mark's tuning hammers to kind of talk about, because I'm going to be in Arizona. But tuning hammers meant to turn the tuning pins. This is one that a lot of people don't have. And this little tool is designed to go ahead and remove that tip. To be honest with you, and I'm going to be vulnerable right now. I have had this tip probably for 10 or 12 years. I have never replaced it. And I kind of wonder how much my tuning game would improve if I did. So I just need to do it. Stacy, I don't know. We need to order a number 2 tuning tip. I don't think I have one in my kit, which is
number 2 tuning tip.
Yeah, this is for the yawn tuning levers. So I would recommend, obviously, having the tuning tip removal tool, which is this. And
I think they call it a tip or a wrench.
Wrench, yeah. So they call this the wrench, Michael? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
And so to remove that tuning tip, and then a couple of different tuning tip sizes. So what you're going to run across nowadays, more than 25 years ago, you're going to run across more pianos that have been restrung. And so when you run across pianos that are restrung, typically they'll have a larger tuning pin, maybe a 3/0 or a 4/0 tuning pin. This is a 2/0, obviously, by the 2 little markings. So you'll get a 3/0 and maybe a 4/0, and that will sit better on that tuning pin. So I would really recommend not only having your tuning hammer lever, but upgrade to have one that you can remove the tips and have a series of tips, as well as your tuning tip removal wrench. So those are some kind of core ones right here. This next one is in the category of mutes. And actually, I'm going to kind of do that. So this is also up for debate. But one of the things that when people use this is called a Papps Mute. When people actually discover these and use them, I feel like it's kind of a game changer for them, because it can go underneath the hammers and go into the string, and it has such a little surface area, and it works really well. And this is called a Papps Mute. All of our technicians use these. And again, I spent maybe a decade not using it, and instead using something like this, a really tiny rubber wedge mute, as well as I would have like a little wire attached to it. This was just so much quicker. It makes the tuning speed just go dramatically quicker, just being able to go through. I'm going to run over and see if I can grab. I just bought another tool, and it's a wooden version of this. Let me see if I can find it. I think it looks really cool. I don't know how practical it is. And then I'm going to come back to Stephanie's question.
I will say the Papps Mute that I had gotten, I had to sand the tip down a little bit because it was getting stuck in the strings as opposed to going in and just sitting there, because it was too thick. So I did sand mine down a little bit. So depending on, what one you get, it may or may not be sanded, but you may have to tweak it a little bit.
That's good to know.
I couldn't find that mute, but I did find this guy. This is what is very typical in the industry as you start, and this is called an Apprentice hammer. And those, I was kind of like never a huge fan of these until I met like one of the finest technicians I've ever met. And he's like, yeah, here, I'm going to show you some things on tuning. And he pulls this thing out. I'm like, what? And he just like lays down this solid, insane tuning in like a half an hour. I'm like, all right, I know nothing. That was amazing. Whoa. Stephanie, go for it.
How do you spell that? The Papps Mute.
Yeah, it is PPS, I believe. It's the Papps Mute. And what we are going to do after this, just like what we did for the last set, is actually kind of write down where you buy them. It'll be on the, what is it, that forum in the general or under tips and tools probably. But it's Papps Mute. I think they're like $15. I believe you can actually get them, Stephanie, on Amazon now. They're used enough. So even if you didn't want to right now set up a Schaff account, I believe you can get these on, Amazon or Howard Piano. And is that how you spell it, Stacy? MAPPS? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, Papps Mute, 100% the way to go.
David, I think the other one that you're talking about is like, I think they call it like a stick mute.
Yes.
I put a link to it.
Yes, the stick mute. And it's cool, but it wasn't as user-friendly as this, the Papps Mute, which is why I'm not really showcasing it. Plus, I lost it. So Papps Mute is a big one. And then you have really two sets of mutes. You'll have felt mutes and rubber mutes. I personally love the felt mutes. The only caveat there is, you see how thick that is right there, right at the tip, versus say this? It's like night and day different. And so what I have to typically do is take this to like a sander and just like file this down to a finer shape, or a pointier shape. But I do like the felt mutes because it seems like it silences the two strings better. And I just like the way it feels. And yes, they do come in two sizes. Obviously the rubber mutes are great. They actually make a mute that's like this, but it's long and skinny, but it's like half this width. And I've started to use that more. It's like half this size. And I'm actually really liking that. The nice thing about all of these mutes is that unlike the tuning lever or some of the other tools, these are really inexpensive. And I highly recommend just playing around with it. Just like, okay, do I like the feeling I get when this one is going in between the strings? Or do I like this one? It's really, there's no right answer. It's just preference.
David,
And, yeah.
can I ask you a question about the felt mute?
Yes.
Does it collect the oils off your hands and transfer it to the strings when you touch it? You have to do you only have to touch it on the green, otherwise you'll get oil on it?
I've never even actually thought about that. That's a great point. And to your point though, Janice, it does feel like this is hardened versus. So this is definitely intended to be touched, but that is a great point. There's never a reason I would touch this. But yeah, I think that you're right. This could collect some kind of oils from your fingers. So yeah, don't touch it with your fingers. But yeah, I never thought about that. But I mean, the same could be said for this too, right? If I'm touching this with my thumb and fingers, the same thing. And I mean, you'd be maybe you have super wet hands, but I don't know.
The rubber ones are easier to clean though.
They are. I've
'Cause you
never
do-
once cleaned. I've never
Yeah,
once cleaned a rubber mute, but you're right.
But you can soak and water them if you get, you know, a lot of oils from your hands. But the felt one, I would think you might get oils from your hands onto that white section and transfer it over to your strings, and then you might be discoloring your strings, right?
Yeah, and it definitely, the oils from your fingers deteriorate strings. And to your point, though, Janice, I've seen some of these that have been left inside pianos over the years, and you're right. The ones I've seen look nasty, really scuzzy. Have you seen those, Stacy? Sometimes when you open up a piano.
Yes, and they are gross. It's true. They're like gross.
Wow. Maybe I could throw this through the wash and see what happens. Yeah.
So David, how many mutes do you typically have in your bag? You know, the active ones that you use plus spares that you might need.
I will have typically something like that. I will have a short stubby one. I usually will use this on like all my grand pianos. I'll just kind of quickly go down the line like that. I like this one for my uprights because it's a little bit more distance between me and the strings, and it's closer to me, and I don't have to push it in as far. If that makes sense. There's you know, it takes up that distance. And then so these are my uprights, and typically this is all I use for my grands. As I'll use a shorter stubby one for my grands, and that's it. And that's such a nice thing to be able to be like, hey, I'm using my ETD and a mute and a tuning lever. That's it. That's just such a nice, just kind of think about that. Just think about that. That's all you need to tune a piano right there.
Robert had a really good question. What's your typical grand mute technique between mid and treble? It's a good question.
Kind of an open
It is a good
space
question.
there.
Say that again, Robert.
Well, when you're going from the mid to the treble on a grand, sometimes, you know, you can do a Papps mute on the uprights, but on the grand, it's how do you mute that to train?
So what I will always do is I'm going to use my 3 fingers. These are the 3 strings. Let's use our imagination. So I will always 100%. Is this coming over as the left string for you guys?
Yeah.
Yep.
Good. Okay. I will take my wedge like this, and I will tune the far left string with my device. I'll tune that to perfection. It's right on. It's so money. I'll do some test blows, whatever. Then I will go ahead, because this is the next set of strings, right? I'm now tuning my middle string to the tuned left string. So so this is like my guide note. Now I'm tuning the middle to it. Then when I'm done, yeah, it's harder to do it because I'm trying to think. I don't have very good fingers. So basically you have to remember that it's not just 3 strings, right? Because the neighboring, you have another set of trichord strings. So you tune your guide note by muting off the other 2. Then you're tuning your middle to your guide. And then finally, you're tuning the far right string to the middle. And then you're done. That's it. Then you move on and do the same thing over again. And you just go down the line. Now, sometimes you're going to run into the end of a section. Let's just say you're in the bass. So if you're in the bass section, what you'll do is obviously you're starting from left to right if you're using an ETD. So you're going from your singles to your doubles. And then a lot of times what you'll do is if you're running into, say, a trichord in the bass, you'll go ahead and just start tuning. If you're at that last strut, you'll go ahead and tune the far right string to the device, then do the middle to the right, and then do the far left to the middle. You just kind of alternate it if you have to go backwards or forwards. Again, this is going to be a lot easier to explain once we have the grand in here, and we can kind of go through it. But it's very simple. It's very easy to do. And you can go so quickly, again, just using the kind of the stubby or wedge. The reason I like the shorter stubby one for grands, because I don't want it to accidentally tip over. And the longer ones have a tendency to kind of droop over or fall. And that's why I like the shorter stubby ones for grands. Oof, look at that, Janice. That looks like hand
David,
oil.
you're talking about the order, as you go left to right. I agree with you. When I've been doing some of my uprights and I hit the brakes, I end, between, for example, the bichords to the tries and stuff, that I do reverse order on those ends.
On the ends, you do reverse order.
On the ends, I end up doing, depending on which side of the brake I'm at, I might go opposite on one side of it just to make it easier to do it.
And I do know a lot of technicians that they won't even, instead of going back, using this as an example. So again, you have your 3 strings. They've muted off these 2 of the 3. They've tuned it. Then they're going ahead and they're tuning the middle to the far right or far left. And then what they'll do is just move on to the next set, and they'll just tune this final string to the other 2 that should be in tune. I've seen that done, but I kind of like to just have no interference whatsoever. So that's why I moved that to go ahead and block off. So I'm still always hearing 2 strings, because that's the thing you all need to think about. At the end of the day, if you're doing an ETD using an electronic tuning device, you're only making 2 sounds sound the same. That's it. That's it. And if we can kind of get that into our minds, it breaks apart the stressfulness of what we're doing. You're making 2 sounds sound the same. And yes, it's difficult to do that because you have to learn how to move your body. You have to learn how to stabilize that tuning pin. You have to hear that. And I find that a lot of times people won't hear it, and then they'll eventually hear it. Then they'll get frustrated because their body can't make it happen. And then eventually the pieces come together and they're able to do it.
It's like when I did my string replacement here a few days ago, I let tension just hold for a while, and then I went back today to actually bring them to pitch with the other string. And I did, like you said, that I muted one of the new strings off, and I tuned new string to existing string, flip-flopped it, and did the other new string to the existing string, so that all 3 were then in unison.
Exactly. This is, and we've seen this before, but this is my ETD. It's not charged right now. I use the Reyburn CyberTuner. We also issue all of our technicians these cradles right here. And I believe we get them from Reyburn CyberTuner, if I'm not mistaken. Before you go out and buy one of these, we're working with them right now to try to get some special discounts. So hold off a little bit, because we'd like to try to find some more things like that for you all. But this little cradle is great, because not only is it great for an upright piano, you can just kind of set it like that. You can put it onto the tuning pin itself, or you can use this little clamp. Now, to be honest with you, I don't know where you can still get this clamp, and that would be a good one for us to find if we can find it.
I still haven't been able to find it. I've looked everywhere.
So maybe we're going to be finding doing another giveaway for some.
Maybe Supply 88 could make one for us called the Artisan.
Oh, yes.
Because they don't make it anymore.
What it does, Justin, is it actually goes on a plate strut and a grand piano. And it allows you to kind of choose a plate strut that's kind of in the center of the piano. Hold on just a second. It's a brilliant tool.
One of my techs wanted one, and I looked. I have spent so much time looking, and I cannot find that one anywhere. I can't find it. So cool, though.
It allows you to put it basically here, any of these plate struts, wherever you want it. And so,
I wonder if you could glue, just like glue a tuning pin or something to a clamp, and then just clamp it to the plate strut, and then you can set your phone holder on that tuning pin. That probably works.
So you're saying that, like, basically, yeah, you could. You definitely could, because all this is just kind of a hollowed out piece that obviously you can see this goes into it. But what, Justin, you're saying is make it so that you've just removed this tuning pin.
No, well, because you can put that on tuning pins, right? On the piano?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, so
but the only problem is,
if you just had an extra tuning pin, you glue that tuning pin to a clamp, and then you can just stick that on there too.
Stick it on right here. Yeah. I just, again, when I bought these, I mean, all of our technicians have them, but they were like $10. And it was just so nice. And they're felted and everything. It's super easy. You're right, though, Stacy. If we can't find them, I'll definitely bring this up to Mark, and he'll have one whipped up, no problem. So, but yeah, then we're just gonna start having all these Artisan tools. By the way, he's sold out of those measuring gauges, so that's cool.
He did sell out. I saw that.
So again, we have the ETD, we have the cradle itself that holds that ETD, and then we have the little clamp. All three of these is something that I will take. So we're going into it right here. This is basically what I have at my service call: my tuning hammer, tuning lever, tuning hammer, my mutes, my ETD setup, and really that's it. If I'm going to do an aural tuning, obviously I'm going to have my tuning fork right here. I use an A440. To be honest, I don't do a lot of aural tuning. I don't get requests for it. And it's just something that I don't derive a lot of pleasure out of. And I feel like I can get a really solid tuning with my ETD. And that's just the reality, just being honest with you. But if you're going to do an aural tuning, which I highly recommend that everybody at least know how to do, you are going to need a tuning fork, and you are going to need a temperament strip. The temperament strips we get asked a lot, well, how do I get those in between, the two, the different trichords and stuff like that? The reality is it sucks, because you're right. You do have to kind of thread it through. You have to find something small enough to poke it in there. I've heard people use those little 6-inch rulers, that are like a 32nd of an inch thick.
Hey, David. So what, if you think about the mutes that have the wire, I've seen people use the loop end.
Yeah, totally.
And to push the felt in.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Oh, is that what you're going to say, Justin? Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
too.
Yep, that's totally. And yes, I've used that. I've used like little flathead screwdrivers and stuff like that. But the reality is, yeah, it kind of sucks, and you kind of have to just kind of feed it through in between the different unisons. And what it does is it blocks off, mutes off 2 out of the 3 strings as you go. So then you can go ahead and get your A440, you can build your temperament, you can do your octave tuning, and build your tuning from scratch. Again, I'll just be honest with you, most technicians that you see out there will not tune this the typical aural way. They'll use the hybrid method that we were just talking about, where you are using your ear, you are testing it, but you're using a device. And the reason I'm a big fan of this is it allows you to really focus on tuning stability. It's hard to really focus on the tuning stability, especially early on when you're getting started doing it the aural tuning way. And people can kind of fight me on that, and that's fine. But we're all about kind of being honest here. And the reality is most technicians will have this setup, but you should know how to tune a piano with this setup. Obviously, you'll have some tuning mutes as well if you're going to do it strictly aurally, because you're doing it in between the breaks and stuff like that. And sometimes you have to mute it off. This is where you can spend a lot of money. Michael, I think, and Victor, and you guys have bought some awesome tuning hammers. And you can spend a lot of money on tuning hammers. I highly recommend that you do. I mean, find something that works for you, and don't be worried about the price. Long term, you will make it back. You will make it back. A lot of these tuning levers are as much as $500 to $700, and that's less than a day's worth of tunings. So
David, how much have you had to change over from a number 2 tip to, let's say, a number 3 tip, over the course of, let's say, the last 3 to 5 years?
I've had to do it because I was in a rebuilding scenario, because we had a rebuilding shop, and we did put on new strings. We did restring with what they call oversized pins. So we actually had literally dedicated tuning hammers, the same hammer just in the shop that had a 3 or a 4 on there. So because of that, we did it fairly regularly. But in the grand scheme of things, you're not going to use it that often. You're just not.
But it's one of those, you almost have to have your spares in the bag for that just in case scenario.
And even then, to be honest with you, I've had it to where I've been like, okay, I have a 2/0 tuning pin, and they put like 5/0 tuning pins in there, massive, big old chunky ones. I was still able to do the tuning. It sounded fine. It was just more difficult because it wasn't seating as far down on that tuning pin. That was the issue. So other than that, again, I do know some technicians that are really hardcore, and they're fun to talk to, but they'll have like 10 different tips, and they'll it's almost like they're doing a tasting with their tips on this particular piano, and they'll have like 5 different levers, tuning hammers, and they'll just be like, okay, no, no, okay, no. And they'll select the right one, and they'll be like, yes, that's it. Great. That's their thing. That is their thing. And I love it. That is not my thing. That is not my thing. But to each their own. And I think in another world, I probably would do that if I were as big a fan as aural tuning as some of these folks are. And I've met a lot of technicians that are just huge uber fans of just doing aural tuning, taking 2.5 hours to do a tuning this way. And that's great. That's totally fine. We're going to find this. I swear, we're going to find this, or we're going to build this, because this is ticking me off now that we can't find it.
Yeah, one of our techs needs that one. It'd make him so happy.
Is that Adam?
I'm like,
okay.
I was like, I'll find it for you. Then I was like, I can't find it. He's like, I'll find it. Then he's like, I can't find it either. So we tried.
Who found the last thing? I think Bruce found the last thing for us. He found that, which
Bruce
hasn't
found
arrived
them.
yet.
Yeah, they're supposed to call. I guess they had to order it and put it in a special container.
That's awesome.
So
Oh,
I'm just waiting for it.
These are the tuning tools this is exactly what you need to kind of get going. And a lot of this is just going to be up to you to be like, okay, yeah, there's the Reyburn Cyber Ear, the CyberTuner. Do you want to do that? Do you want to do PianoScope? Do you want to do Verituner or Tunelab? Those are all the things you have to weigh. I'm a big fan of the piano CyberTuner, a huge fan of that. I've only ever used the SAT3, which was the big bulky blue one with the kind of the lights that went around. So for me to jump from that to the CyberTuner was just like mind blowing. And I just I fell in love. It was love at first sight. I loved it, and I could use it. There's some new options for you all that just were not there when I was doing this. PianoScope is a big one that I know is kind of taken over the industry.
That's
the cool
the one
thing about
I'm using, and I've not had any issues with it so far. But
yeah,
again, I think there's 3 or 4 that are reputable,
totally
ETDs out there that you can go with any of them and probably be just fine.
Yeah. It's just it all depends on kind of what you want to do. But right there, that's potentially, I don't know, $800 for a CyberTuner. That's with the discount. Another $400 for a tuning lever, and some miscellaneous stuff. So you could be into this $1,500 for the tuning setup fairly easily. Of course, that's that option. But I mean, if you're going here, this is a very basic. I mean, you can get this on Amazon for probably $50, and this can kind of get you going. And again, that one technician blew my mind. He was a 40-year tech. He's from Japan, and this is what he had, and he just made it work and figured it out. So, but again, you don't have to go to this degree right away. The nice thing when you go to the ETDs is it does allow you to go into customers' houses sooner. And it kind of gives you a bit of a win. I don't know if you've all experienced that as well, but tuning 100% aurally, building your temperament, it is a frustrating endeavor, and it takes a while to be able to go through a whole piano on day one and just be like, wow, I actually went through a piano. It took me all day, but it does sound okay. This is going to take a while. So that's why I'm a big fan of this, because sometimes it's nice to get some wins under your belt especially when you're starting out, because I would rather you use the ETD and get excited and have fun with it than get really discouraged and give up with the aural tuning. And to be honest, when I was working with another school, I would have a lot of people that they would give up, and they would call us and say, hey, can I have my money back? And I'd be like, well, where are you stuck? And they're like, I'm doing tuning and I'm trying to do my temperament. And I would say, before you do that, just do this. And then they would get it. It would click. And then they would just be like, yes, this is fun again. I like this. And then they go back and do the aural tuning after they've worked with the ETD and they have fun with it. So that's kind of my 2 cents.
On your tuning hammer, I know that people have different preferences on the angle of the tip to the lever itself. What is the angle of your hammer, and what has been successful for you?
So what's been successful for me for this particular tuning lever is it's not a very extreme angle. I find that the more extreme that angle is, the more prone to bending the pin I am. This feels like it's a more direct connection. We're going to talk about this a little bit with Mark, hopefully Mark on Wednesday, but I think I have maybe it might be a 7 degree. And so it's not very much, but the thing that makes this work really well is it is fairly long. In fact, these don't come like this. I think that Bruce, we adjusted yours because this came with a different orientation. It used to be that this longer part right here you see was flipped and it was attached right here. My mentor was the person who tuned me on to these tuning hammers, and he adjusted it saying, hey, I like to have this a little bit length right here so that I can miss the plate struts. So it's high enough, but it's also very minimal angle. My brother Adam he's a great, phenomenal tuner, and his is right down. It goes, it's like, I feel like it's that much. It's like, it goes right down to the tuning pin and it's angled more. So the more I think about it, the more I grow in Pianocraft, the more I'm realizing that today's hammers that you can get, there's not a bad option. When you go to these supply houses, I think that we have, as an industry, have outgrown any bad options. And so, obviously this is the Apprentice hammer. It's almost just like it's practically a 90 degrees right here. It's maybe 4 degrees, 3 degrees at a rate of pitch right there. For me, I'm more of a fan of that. I'm more of a fan of less of an angle. And I can't say that that's right or wrong. That's personal preference. I feel like I just have more control when it's less of an angle.
Yeah, I think my basic hammer and then the tip that came with my new hammer was like 12 to 12 and a half degrees. And when I moved over to the 10 degree tip for the new hammer, I was much more happy on my tuning.
Really? Explain that.
That 10 degree, when I was, of course, I've not done a grand. I've only been doing uprights, but I felt that my control was a lot better. And to your point, felt like I was not going to feel like I'm going to bend a pin.
Yeah.
So, and again, I also have one that's a lower profile 5 degree that I will play with it as well. I went ahead and spend an extra $30 or $40 for the extra tip with the 5 degree angle. But definitely, I felt more comfortable with the 10 degree than I did with the 12 and a half. So that's my personal preference. But to your point, there could be other people that like the 12 degree and it works for their body shape with their technique. So
yes. Well, and I love the fact that you were able to try it out. What I mean? And you could try it. You had some ability. I think that Victor, weren't you saying that Randy now has the ability to change the angles on his hammers?
Yeah, he just came out with them. I think you can order them with now. You can change from a 10. Oh, I'm sorry. You can change from a 10 to a 15. I think he might have a 12 and a half.
Okay. So we don't have anything less than a 10. Okay.
No, I think Mark was talking about anything less than 10. It might be negative because pins are at 7 degrees already to begin with. So if you're at a 7 degree or even a 5, you're kind of actually going like kind of below the pin instead of above
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that. Yeah, I don't know. There's so many ways of doing the pianos. The only thing that I really don't recommend when you're starting out, and it makes sense, and a lot of people go into that, is using those impact hammers. So those are impact hammers. There's a weighted hammer, and that the idea is that you use it. You actually, instead of having to kind of go up to the piano like so, and get your body into it like that, you actually put it on there and onto the tuning pin, and you just kind of click it over to the sharp or flat. It's a great thing to work on and do after you know how to set the tuning pin. So we had a technician come to us, and we were amazed. He was able to do it pretty well. He was quick at it. It sounded, it held. But then when he went to go do grand pianos, he couldn't do it because he didn't know how to set the tuning pin. And so I would say, if you're going to look into the impact hammers, do it, but only after you know how to really set the tuning pin. Otherwise, you're potentially shooting yourself in the foot. And I know that they make a grand piano one. I think it's a couple grand or $1,500. So I don't know. It'd be weird if like you're trading off like wear on your shoulder for like now you have wear on your like wrists. I don't know.
Can I ask a question on setting the pin? Because I tend to overshoot a lot, and I know that you just go just past, and you've talked about this, but sometimes I'll go click it. It's like, dang it, I'm 35 cents sharp.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm parallel parking. Okay, so I'm going to back out. I'm going to push back down below. Do I come back up? I mean, do you go back below again and come up and try and get it just past?
Yeah. So I think what typically happens, and I see this with people, is they'll, when we're training, they'll go past and they're like, shoot. And it will be probably 10 cents plus. And then they'll like try to kind of ease it, kind of like force it back, and it will always come back. You've overshot it too much. It's going to want to go sharp again. So you have to break it back down again and then try and reset it. And I have to do that from time to time. You guys have caught me in some of my tunings, and I've overshot it, and I have to go back. And it's just the only way to do it. I'm just going to kind of show you.
So you go back below a little bit then and try and.
Say it again, Robert.
Well, so you go back below.
Correct.
0 and come back above. Because sometimes I think, okay, I'm 30 above. Can I just kind of ease it down, or should I go completely below? You're saying go back below a little bit.
Below. Yeah, you're going to go back below. You want to barely, so that you can just move it right where you need it to go. But here I'm going to go sharp. I'm trying to push it flat right now. Okay, it's good. Then I let go of it and it goes sharp again because I've overshot it. So now I have to go.
Okay.
So
I know,
David, one thing I saw on my old uprights that I've been working on, you would get a series of pins where you get good technique and you're hitting it just a little bit sharp and nudging it flat and you're going good. Then you get a series of pins that just don't want to do it. And they are going way sharp or way flat and are a lot more either loose or they're so tight that you're having to put more effort and you're overshooting a lot. Is that just a matter of partially the piano or partially just getting used to technique as well?
It's unfortunately, I've come to realize that it isn't really the piano. It's your body getting used to it. Because you can pretty much make the piano if your body's making it finite movements, you can make it do the same thing for the most part. So yeah, it is weird because your body is going to know after you do 500 or 1,000 or 10,000 piano tunings, it's going to be like, oh yeah, my body remembers it was this one back in the day. I remember a piano that's feeling like that. There's a book, what is it? Piano. The body keeps the score. The body keeps the score when it comes to your piano tuning. It just knows it.
David, what about we did a CA treatment on a piano, but it totally changed the pin feel, and it was really hard to get used to. Do you have any advice for that? How to navigate? Because after that, there's really no more clicking. It's kind of just like it was like a lot of guessing. You'd kind of pull. Yeah, it was really hard to tell where you were.
Are you saying that you glue treated the pin block?
Yes.
Yeah. So when you do that, just FYI, it doesn't tune the same. You're right. It is kind of no. Same with if you're tapping tuning pins down, it will be inconsistent. That definitely throws a massive wrench in it. So it's not to say that you can't tune it and stuff. It will tune differently and very inconsistently. And that's just normal. That's just normal. You didn't do anything wrong. That's just the nature of it, because the wood fibers will swell and seize differently from pin to pin. Yeah. Do you want to hear a crazy Steinway story about that? I'm not going to wait for a yes, because I'm just going to tell you. This was a crazy story. Steinway was having a problem in their production that the pianos would get to the point where they were tuning them, and by that time, the tuning pins were slipping like crazy. They had no idea what was going on. They were looking into the temperature, the humidity of the space that they were building them in. They were looking at the wood that they were using. Was it a wrong forest? Was it this? Was it that? Was it the product? What is going on with this? And they found out, and I'm going to make up his name. They found out that it was Bob. Bob was ruining the pins, and he was doing it this way. Every day for lunch, Bob would have grilled chicken for his lunch. And he was in charge of stringing. And Bob would have his lunch, fried chicken, and then with his greasy fingers would go ahead and start restringing, tapping the tuning pins in with these new strings. Fast forward a month or two later, when it's down to that stuff had eked itself into that wood, and to the point where the pianos were unusable. True story. And this was done back in the 40s, I think it was. Not crazy? Crazy. So these things are temperamental. So when you, what made me think of that is, yeah, when you add a foreign element, let's just call that, all bets are off.
So it's not quite the syrup incident that Victor had?
Not quite the syrup incident.
Yeah,
Not quite the syrup.
My mentor has a similar story to that. They got him to restring a piano for university, but the guy that prepped it had used some sort of Scotch product on the plate before he was going to go, and all of it got in the pin block. And so my mentor strung it and everything. When he says the pins were like slipping like crazy, and he's like, "What did you use?" And so after that, everybody at the school, the tuners are working on it. They're like, "Oh my God, who restrung this?" And they were like, "Oh, it was Michael White." And he was like, "Oh, come on, guys, that wasn't my fault." He's like, "It's not my fault. They used whatever to lube up those pins." So he said it took a few years before they stopped blaming that problem on him.
Yeah. I'm actually amazed that more pianos don't have major issues like that, because it doesn't take much for those pins to really, have some weird corrosion, weird thing in them for them not to slip. But it is more of a rare thing, thank God, because when it's bad, it's bad. As your mentor found that with those, and the people with the chicken, Bob with the chicken, it gets bad.
Or cats. Cats.
Or cats. I just had a friend, they had a cat that threw up in their piano, and it was just, yeah.
Yeah.
What about, we were pretty worried about this. Some customers called us, they want to get the piano tuned. They're like, we tried tuning it ourselves, and of course they couldn't. So they called us, and when I got there to look at it, the husband was like, he's like, yeah, those things were pretty tight, so I sprayed WD-40 on it. And I was like, what do you, on what? And he's like, those things right there. And he pointed into the pins. And I was like, how much did you spray? And he's like, I sprayed quite a bit. They were really tight. So I thought they were like seized or something. And I'm still pretty worried about that pin block. It tuned fine, but have you ever heard of anything like that? Do you think it will damage the block?
I've never heard of a customer doing that. I've heard of technicians doing stuff like that. And I don't, we're changing the trajectory, y'all, in Pianocraft. We are not going to do that.
That sounds like something in the future, something will happen because of that long term, that it's going to degrade the pin block long term. It may not be five years from now, it might be longer, but it sounds like something's going to go wrong.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, I have a horror story. So we rebuilt lots and lots of pianos, and for a period of about 3 years, we were getting our Steinways coming back to us. Maybe almost like, I think it was like 5 or 10 of them, and the tuning pins were slipping. We were freaking out. We called Bolduc. We called them everything, and because we were having these pianos come back, sure enough, I would put the tuning hammer on it and go woo, like that loose. And like, what in the world? And I have to, this was me. It was totally me. What I was doing was it was a grand pianos. And so the plate would go down on the pin block, and then you would screw in what they call the webbing screws. Those are the screws that go into the plate and then go into the pin block. And what I had been doing for a short period of time was putting a little bit of beeswax lubricant on those screws. And it had wicked over a series of about 7 years into those areas. And that would be inches away. And so 7 years later, these pianos were untunable in these sections where they were closest to those. And it was, we ate tens of thousands of dollars and redid pianos because of that.
You had to redo them?
Put all new pin blocks in them.
So why were you using that? Why were you using the beeswax?
Because when you're pushing those screws into a brand new pin block, you know, it's really tight. You have to use a massive thing. So I was using just a little bit of beeswax to lubricate the new screws so that they would go into the new pin block a little easier. It was totally my fault. It was totally my bad, and I paid the cost for that one. That was all.
So on the redo for those screws, you just didn't use. You just had to slowly do it manually with no.
Exactly.
beeswax.
Exactly. I think what we did is we ended up making the holes a little bit larger because maybe the holes were just a little bit too snug. And so that's what we did. And that's why I'm like, hey, y'all, you want to get into rebuilding? Just know what you may not know. I had no idea that after 7 years, that was going to wick 4 inches into the pin block to make them unusable. No idea. I'm sure a rebuilder is probably going to watch this and be like, you Twinkie head. Of course you don't do that. I know that now. And so you all will make little mistakes like that. Some hopefully will be less expensive than others, but just know that that's just the cost of, you know, so.
And always have empathy for those who make those mistakes because it's never intentional, of course. It's never intentional. They really wouldn't have done it unless they thought they had. I mean, I know good intentions aren't always good results, but still, you just have to have some empathy.
It was bad. It was bad. Yeah. So go ahead.
I'm sorry. Talking about plate bolts and things. Sometimes we have had pianos where it was going out pretty quick or stability issues. And I guess it's just a tip to check the plate bolts and make sure everything's tight. So we always carry a big flathead or a big socket set to tighten those plate screws.
Yeah. Yeah. So the plate screws around the perimeter of the plate, you know, those can get loose. I'm always super hesitant to do that because, I mean, some of you may or may not know, a broken plate is like pretty much the only thing we can't fix. I know there's people that say, oh, you can do this special treatment where you're doing this lock and stitch. I wouldn't put my money on that. So I'm very careful when it comes to plates. and putting any more tension on it. And so again, this is one of the things that I'm glad I don't do the rebuilding anymore, because that was always, I would come into the shop and there'd be like 5 plates leaning on each other, you know, and on a concrete floor, and it could have fallen. And then we have $250,000 worth of pianos that we have to give money back to, you know, stuff like that. So just know that we're talking about tools like this. You can't do that much damage with some tools like this, which is nice. We're talking piano tuning tools. You guys are going to be set. You're all going to be set. And so, but it is, again, we've talked about this. This is an investment. This is an investment into something that you potentially will absolutely love doing. And I know that I've talked to so many of you and you just love it. You know, Michael, you love it. Robert, you love it. In between going and getting possums off your property, you're tuning pianos.
He got away. I couldn't trap him. I used one of those grabber things. You can get things off a high shelf. Got him by the tail and phew, he was slick.
It wasn't meant to be.
He was slick. I don't know. But I have a question for Michael. I'm just learning this site, but Michael, you're apparently our leader. You have all these points. What does that mean? How are you getting all these points?
I have no idea how I got to be the points leader.
I got
on
4
the
points. Michael's got
leaderboard.
150.
I have
Does he
no
get a
idea
coupon
how.
or something? How do we
What do you mean points? What do you mean points? There's a points.
On the,
Yeah.
on the left-hand side, when you see find members in the area, there's a leaderboard.
Yep. What?
What's that mean, Stacey?
Michael is the leader.
I think it's because he's posting questions. He's posting
it's how
things.
often you're active on it and what you do.
I don't know how I end up. I don't know whether part of it's I filled
So
out my
humble,
profile fully.
leader.
I don't know.
Yeah, it has to do with all that stuff. It gives you points on how active you are on the platform. But should we give maybe at the end of the
Yeah,
month?
we'll have to come up with some kind of a slick thing.
I have some ideas. I'll talk to you about them. I have some fun ideas.
I'm
Maybe
off for
maybe a new
challenges.
tool.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Stacy is working really hard at creating the final component in the membership stuff, and that is the helpful resources. So by the end of the week, our goal is to go ahead and when you go to your library, if everybody's on your library, you see, I think, 2 products. There's the video as well as the mentoring, the platform. And so pretty soon there's going to be a third one, which is resources. And so that's going to be a lot of fun little things, you know, educational, like necessities and potentially partnership discounts and stuff like that.
Yep, those are the points.
So I'm sharing my screen for you, David.
Wow, look at you.
So yeah,
many points.
I have no idea how I got that many. Tell you the truth.
Sounds like
No
a
idea.
Click on the eye next to the leaderboard.
Your posts were inspiring. Yeah, all these things. Yep.
I would bet he gets a lot of points for putting his business website on that.
Ooh, you're right. I bet you do.
He's got a business website and it's on there. So my guess.
So I put all my socials. I put the website here.
Well, that was worth 100 points for us. You sharing that?
Wow. All right. I'm gonna have to level up tonight. Because I'm posting stuff on there too. Jeez.
I don't know whether there's no way to see everything below first through third. I don't think, is there? Yeah, it will. It shows other people. Yeah.
Who's third and second?
So it's David and Justin. Justin's second.
Oh my gosh. All right.
It's because of that challenge Stacy posted. The participating in that gets you 100 points immediately.
Oh. I should have finished my own challenge. No, I was just doing that for an example. I need to do like a good one. Yeah.
All right. So here's something that I would be really appreciative if you all could do on two days from now, on Wednesday when we do it. It's all about tuning hammers. And I would love for you all to bring yours to this and just say, hey, here's what I like about it. Here's the price point roughly on it. You don't have to get into specifics, but it's like, what do you like about it and why? Because I think that's good for everybody to kind of pull what they have so that we can kind of see, just everybody sees what's out there. Because a lot of us you don't see. You just don't know what else is out there. And I'm going to hopefully con my dear friend Mark into this one so that we can go ahead and talk about it, because he's just the tool expert. And so he'll talk about deflection. He'll talk about the why and why nots. And so I'm going to see if I can coax him into doing another one with me. Wait, did somebody say about ETD holder?
Oh, Bruce asked. Bruce is going to find it for us because Bruce finds everything.
Bruce is
for
like
us.
he's like a private eye.
He found the Morroway for
He
finishing.
did. That
He
took me
needs
like a year. And I
200
couldn't
points
find
for
it.
that.
Yeah, he should get 100 points for that.
It should have. How do I give people points?
All right, so Wednesday, tuning levers, bring your tuning hammers, bring your questions for it. And also, I would love to know, granted, you might have your tuning hammer, but what other tuning hammer would you like instead? You know what I mean? Like, because Randy's got a couple of them on my list. So hopefully I'll be able to call him and just be like, hey, Randy, we're doing this thing. Maybe I should test out that one. That's really cool in cobalt blue. So just go from there. So I will see you on Wednesday. I will be in the sunshine in Arizona, but we're going to talk tuning hammers, and I'm excited for that. So I will see you on Wednesday.
Thanks,
and then I'm going to level up between now and then. Good luck, Michael, because I'm coming for you.
That's funny.
I'll see y'all.